Cinphomaniac is full of spoilers. If the movie's there in the title, we're probably gonna say everything that happens in it. So don't fucking listen if you don't wanna know.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Matrix Resurrections, you watched it. Did you also end up rewatching all these other Matrix movies? Like where
I rewatched all them. I rewatched everything. Yeah.
Did you rewatch the Animatrix?
No, I did not watch anything animated. I watched the original trilogy plus the new.
Okay, so here's the interesting
I watched
thing,
4
Dana.
films.
I obviously, when I said let's do this, and you said you just watched Resurrections, you're gonna watch them all again. I was like, great, that's kind of what I do. I will do the same. I did not do that. I did not watch a single fucking Matrix thing in the last month.
Wait, when did you see? When did
Resurrections?
you see Resurrections?
The day it dropped on HBO Max, like over a month ago.
It has been over a month, hasn't it?
Yeah,
I don't know why.
I think it dropped. No, it's almost exactly a month. I think it dropped like the 22nd or 21st last month, obviously.
You're probably right.
So yeah, I've only seen it the one time. Now, in the following days and weeks from seeing it, I obviously released my initial reaction, but I also got to hear other people's takes, and I've been tracking the discourse around the movie, and so I'm familiar with that. And I was looking forward to let me revisit, let me get back into it. Let me go into these other movies, because I think even before the movie came out, I talked about let's really get into the Matrix. Like not only you have to watch the movies, but the commentaries, and there's so much content. And this is, keep in mind, this is all content I have consumed many times before, just not fairly recently. So that's where we're at right now. So I guess my point to you, Dana, is I'm happy to talk about the Matrix. I mean, I don't know what else we're going to do if we don't, but I just saying I'm not coming to it with the same sort of I literally do not have some giant page of notes in front of me at all for this.
Yeah, you typically come with the veracity of someone who is
fucking. I come
who's been silenced for an eon, and I look forward to that.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's going to be nice to just have a casual chat about whatever.
Ooh, well, that's the thing. I don't want to set that because you know me. Eventually, it comes out, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. I guess I'm just flagging this for you and assuming that I don't edit this out entirely. I'll, for the audience too. This is coming from in a different sort of mind space than I usually am on this podcast, for better or for worse. I'll also just say that's the thing. It's not like I haven't done the work of Matrix scholarship. I certainly have. And last thing too is just I couldn't even do it because I mean, in a lot of ways, this is a good thing because for many of the months where we were doing the pod, I was doing less of this, but the reason, one of the many reasons I've been so busy is I've been screenwriting the script. So I just, when I'm in that mode of focus and attention and writing, that's usually what I'm doing rather than coming up with analyses for the movies, though I've been watching stuff. And let's talk about the Matrix. And I think
let's talk about it.
I think, Dana, because this if I didn't make this clear before, let me make it clear now. I want to eventually do the deep dives into the Matrix films that I think our audience is owed, that I know I can deliver. This is not going to be that today. And I think even though I know you watched all the original trilogy and you can obviously draw upon that for context the same way I inevitably will, I really think we should just focus the conversation on the Matrix Resurrections and just
that is fair. That is fair because the deep dive would there's so much symbolism. There's so much there's so many analogies as well that you can dive into with the Matrix, and there's a lot of mythology in there to get into. It is a deep dive. However,
for sure,
in this more recent adaptation, it is adaptation. It is I have a lot less to say.
Okay, so let's start with that because I gave my initial reactions, and I don't know if you've listened to them or anything. I'll recap them, but I kind of just want to let you start. Like, what do you think of the movie? What do you think right after you watched it? Did that opinion change in however many days or weeks it's been since? Like, what's going on? Give me that.
I think that there were elements of nostalgia specifically that I enjoyed. Don't get me wrong. I was heavily disappointed. There, some of the things that I do like, I only liked them because they reminded me of the previous films. Some of the things that bothered me were so prominent that it was like I couldn't get back into the fact that it was the Matrix. One of those things for me was just overall cinematography. I was looking for that green hue. I was looking for that kind of desaturation, that paleness, that lack of life. I understand that this whole color evolution might be symbolic of the director's, and the whole story might be symbolic of the director's place in life. In my opinion, it seems like an evolution, also giving Trinity this equal parts, woman and man, yin and yang. They both have power. It takes away from the overall story, but symbolically, if you're in a place of, transition, or a place of feeling feminine and masculine, this story is for you and does make sense. But not, in my opinion, in addition to the trilogy. It takes away from it for me. It takes away from the solidness of the story that was. It's adding this kind of side tangent. It reminds me of this, like, you have something that's sound, like a sound structure, and then you're just kind of adding this, well, let's just put this other thing on it too. It kind of seems like an afterthought addition. And just the fact that visually it wasn't the same for me took me out of it immediately. However, there were things that I did very much enjoy. I liked that there were, the opening was kind of like the original opening.
Oh yeah.
That makes sense. That's
it very consciously. Yeah.
Consciously, I think it may have even been shot for shot. Don't quote me on that. It may have been shot for shot. It may not.
Parts of it were shot for shot. Yes. But Broadway,
but it felt the same, which is kind of what made the rest of what was to come a little more disappointing for me. Because I did feel like, okay, I'm going to get those. I don't know if you recall getting like stressed watching The Matrix. Like when I first watched
the original,
the original for sure, like feeling my blood pressure go up and my heart racing and like feeling the stress of this film. And maybe I'm just older and I'm desensitized, and that's probably part of the case, but I got none of that from this. I think this is what I was going to tie in with the martial arts standpoint. As someone who studies martial arts, as someone who is a fan, there was a lot less from Neo. There was a lot less from him. To be fair, when you get to a power level where you can control things on a molecular level, why would you bother moving your arms or legs? But I was disappointed that there wasn't more. And maybe, you know what, good on you, Keanu. Hopefully he got some rest. Not that he got rest. Like, this was a difficult shoot for sure. But I can't imagine having to do something like the original Matrix fight choreo as an older person, having to do that kind of stunts.
He does the John Wick movies.
He does the John Wick movies, and he tells
where literally his stunt double, who's in this movie by the way, directs them. So like,
he says how brutal they are, how tough it is.
Oh no. So I know what you're saying.
He was like, I'm glad Neo can control things with just his hands.
He definitely got more rest than he does doing the John Wick movies, which is surprising given the precedent in the previous Matrix movies. No doubt about that.
This was still a really tough and grueling shoot, but it was easier than John Wick. And that's kind of my point. I was a little sad at that too. Like, I kind of missed some of that action from Neo, although we do get some of it. We get the recreation of the dojo fight scene. That's kind of, with the new the new Morpheus, which
The
I
new
understand,
Morpheus.
which I understand, but I don't have to like. Um, yeah, I also
This is I want to let you keep going, Data, but this is fascinating because there's a million things you've already said that I definitely want to go a little bit more into, and we inevitably will. But like, I think, is this the first time you've ever disliked a movie on this podcast? Like, I think it might be.
It might be the first time that I've had a balance of of more than 60-40 toward a film. Yeah. But I have like this visceral negativity.
80-10 on this, or 9
I'm like,
10-90 on this. I mean,
yeah, something like
seems
that.
like it. I
try to be a glass half full type person. And
you
look
don't
for
have
positives,
to be, is my point.
but I just can't. But I can't. It's tough for me. I think
that's what I'm getting at. Is I think it says something interesting that this is the one that broke you.
Yeah. No. Well, it was a lot of expectations, and it was a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations, and she went a direction that was, I think, a little too meta for the story. You know, if I take it apart symbolically,
Waiting for you to bring that word up.
A little too symbolic of maybe a life situation, or making a statement about equality. I see it, and it is important, but I think it feels out of place in this storyline. It feels unnatural in the line of the Matrix stories, where it was this savior remake. It was this biblical, full of symbolism remake, and now it kind of has this whole side story that doesn't necessarily further or strengthen the original. I did like that in the beginning, you kind of have a choice, the way that Neo has a choice. You have a choice to believe, is he crazy? Does Neil Patrick Harris, is he telling him the truth, or is the Matrix real? So that I did enjoy being kind of back there again.
Well, it's interesting. I get what you mean. They definitely did do a good did the job they did to make it feel like, yes, there's that tension there. And I don't want to give too much away about where I want to take this conversation, but I will just say, like, yeah, I know that I think there's a lot of interesting or compelling mystery and vibe to that first part. But I mean, honestly, what you just proposed, the central question is kind of funny, because I think you're correct in the sense that is like the narrative intent to some extent. But it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, but the main character's not going to die. It's like that, because it's like, could you imagine if this movie was the movie where it was like, actually, the entire first three Matrix movies didn't really happen, and Neo is just an ordinary guy, and I guess that is just the rest of the movie. Like, you know what I mean? By definition, it's like more than that. But nevertheless, I thought the proposing of the question was an interesting point. But I don't want to get too into that. Let me just start like this, Data, because you've.
Well, I could talk about one more thing that I did like.
Give me a few more things.
Okay, so another thing I did like, and maybe it was on the nose for too many people, but I don't care. I liked it. I liked the song choices that were indicative of what's happening in the scene. For instance, they played Chasing Rabbits.
White Rabbit,
Jefferson Airplane. Yeah, exactly. Played Jefferson Airplane while he's chasing the White Rabbit, essentially, which is a recall to the original Matrix, which I go, oh, look at that. That's cheeky.
So
I like
recall
that.
To Alice in Wonderland.
To Alice in Wonderland, too.
Yes. Yeah.
If you want to take it OG.
Yes.
I just couldn't. I think it was just so annoying to me, the character versions of the original crew and of Morpheus. I wasn't too much of a fan. I did, however, enjoy how they finally kind of, the way that they showed humanity evolving, which kind of made sense all along, for them to kind of harness some of the machines to work with them instead of working against them. Which I was like, well, duh, it's the only way. The only thing that can beat machines is more machines. And I also did like Jada's role as well.
I kind of think I really just want to ask you follow-up questions to a bunch of stuff you said, honestly. But,
I like that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And that'll be, I mean, I'll be able to kind of get into like my thoughts on it through that mechanism. But honestly, like I've had so long now to have my own thoughts about it. I like your reaction to me is very interesting. So Data, I wish I could sit here and put it to you like this. Like I want to. I mean, I'm going to anyway, even though it doesn't quite work, which is you could take the blue pill and we could just let you have your thoughts as you say. And because I don't find any of them to be really objectionable at all. They all make perfect sense. I think anyone who's seen the movie will understand exactly where you're coming from.
Wait a second.
I think more or less like it's
Are you telling me that you like this movie?
I didn't say that yet. I didn't say that. Don't step on my line, Dana.
Burn it all to the ground.
Okay.
Marcus.
Okay. Or I can give you the red pill.
Give me the
And
red
I could
pill.
show you like a very weird world of like, I don't know, kind of basically reverse reality where every single thing that is supposedly bad is actually what's meant to be good about it. And you can choose. You can just take the red pill, or you take the blue pill.
Take the blue
we end the
pill
podcast
ever?
right now. You take the red pill and you go see how deep that rabbit hole goes. Okay, Dana?
Okay,
So-
I'll take the blue one. Peace. Bye. No, I'm
Oh
kidding.
man.
I want the
You know,
red
it's
pill.
totally
Come
your right
on.
to take the blue pill. Maybe you're just like Cypher. Just sit there and be like, when
Give me the
I
steak.
put this steak in my mouth,
It tastes like
I
steak.
know that it's not real, but it tastes good. Whatever the fuck he says there.
No,
Great.
give me the red pill. You
Okay.
had time.
Yeah, a ton. Okay, now this is what I meant when I said this metaphor doesn't work, because you immediately jumped in, you're going to tell me you like this movie. No, I'm not going to tell you that, because like, let me put it this way. I think, because one of the questions I asked you, which you didn't quite answer, but I feel like everything else you said in a roundabout way tells me what I need to know with this. Well, actually, let me ask you one specifically. You said you rewatched all the other Matrix movies. Did you watch the other three before you watched Revolutions or after?
After.
So you watched Revolutions, then went back and watched the other.
Yeah, and I was like, oh yeah, these are great.
I'm not okay. I can't be sure which would make the experience worse. But okay, I could see an argument both ways in both scenarios. But in any case, one of the things I was asking was like, oh, did you feel this way on just, again, I've only watched it once, so I can't even talk about multiple viewings, but like, did you feel this way like once and then thought about it and felt more like you disliked it or less like you disliked it?
No, I think I wasn't that impressed with it. And the more I thought about it, the more I didn't like it.
Okay, that answers my question. The more you thought about it, the more you didn't like it. Now,
The
Here's
more I
what
thought
I'll
about it,
say.
the more I was sad.
I think I more or less summed this up on my the episode I released last month, my sort of instant reaction to the film. My basic take was this. I gave it a pretty positive comment. I was like, I like this movie. It's weird. It kind of begs you almost not to like it in a lot of ways. But I feel like, I don't know, it's something about it was interesting or captivating to me. The questions that it was making me consider were interesting to me. Did I think everything in it was like executed smoothly? Did some of the things that I think even certainly now, even especially, I could attempt to fold into, well, it's like this way for this reason, therefore X. Well, it doesn't really change the fact that I wish I got something different, or I can imagine, or I have fond memory of like it could be in this way. And I think in the specific areas that I'm talking about, you did that. It wouldn't necessarily take away from what I think the overarching message and point and exercise this movie's trying to indulge in.
You would think it would be too on the nose that they had the montage of the video game creation, and it was literally what's happening with the film, where like they told the directors, like, we're making another Matrix, you can be involved or not. And that's literally what they told Neo. We're making another game, you can be involved or not.
Okay, so I want to address that, but I just let me finish because like once I get into that
I thought that
territory,
would annoy you so much.
Okay, hold on. I don't want to say whether anything annoyed me or didn't annoy me. I just want to stress this. Like, I think to the point I was just making, like, there's certain things that, yeah, I would want. I think the most obvious one. I don't want to like jump into this conversation just yet, but I'll just say it so people, can understand what I mean. Like, one of the reasons I love the Matrix movies, it wasn't even one of the reasons why I would typically certainly defend Matrix Reloaded, is that there's just truly incredible, truly unique, and truly like memorable, because I still think about them and I'm like, hell yeah. Action set pieces that like I could just watch on a loop all day. And I'm talking even ones that have really, really dated looking CGI that kind of does not hold up at all, but you just don't even fucking give a shit.
You don't care. It's still so fun.
It's exactly.
And Monica Bellucci's in that one.
That's the whole trick, Dana. Because the minute I recognize why I want that it's fun, that it's this, that it's that it's what I've gotten before, I immediately am forced to reconcile that it does, no matter how much I want to have it both ways, contradict the intention of this movie as I and I think many people have come to understand. So that's what I want to get into. And I'll just say, does that intention inherently make it good? No. And to answer my own question that I asked you, I came out of it because like when I'm watching this movie the first time, the first like hour plus, I am like, oh shit. Like even in the little pockets in the beginning, including with the scene you were referring to, where I'm like, but like I quickly found myself like getting over the hesitation, ironically, not unlike what I was talking about with Show You, and seeing kind of what I feel like is through the veil into something more interesting that the movie is inviting me to see. And then being like, okay, I fuck with it. I don't know, but I fuck with it. And I'm enjoying it and I'm enjoying it. But then the movie gets into the second half and I'm just like, okay, I'm enjoying this less. I'm enjoying this a little less. I'm enjoying this a little less. By the time the movie ends, I'm like, well, I still really enjoyed like the first half of it. And then I'm kind of like thinking about it. And I'm thinking about the whole, and I'm like, well, I like that it's giving me these questions to answer. I like this. So that's why when I go in to record that podcast, the rapid fire, I'm mostly pretty positive. I think everything I could say to you right now about what I didn't like about the movie are the exact same things I said on that rapid fire.
Now it's my time now that we've talked about it, I can listen to it. I didn't want to know anything you had to say about it because I wanted to come in with my blank opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you didn't listen to it. I don't think you should have. In fact, I think I told you don't listen to this.
You specifically, I think, told me not to.
yeah, no, I did. But like, here's the thing, like, I do feel a little differently about it than I did then, even though I could say the verbatim same things and they would all still be true. And the way I feel differently about it is, you could say, if you want to be simple about it, and this is why when I talk red pill, blue pill, like the analogy doesn't quite fully work, because I'm not sitting here telling you I like it, like, to be very clear. And I guess if I had to say, I feel less enthusiastic about it than I did when I saw it that day, or even in the following days or weeks, when the conversation around it was starting to become even more engaging. However, I do not really think that has anything to do with the movie. Not really. And I think, I honestly think that if anything, I'm more than willing to bet that I watched the movie a second time, and certainly anytime after that, I'm only going to find the things that I find interesting about it more interesting. And the things that I don't like about it, maybe I'll like them even less, but it won't matter. And just like, I guess this is one of those examples where a movie really, in my mind, is, if you're asking whether it's good or bad, you're almost like asking the wrong question. Which is a very matrixy way to look at it. Like, I'm
sure. Yeah, it is.
Now, here's the next question I want to ask you. And this is like, before we go into anything else with Matrix Revolutions, I address the scene you're talking about. I address all that. What is your thought on Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions? Because obviously before this movie even came out, there's been a long-standing debate. It's not dissimilar to the Star Wars prequels, where people are like, there's a group of somewhat vocal defenders, but for the most part, the vibe you get is that people either don't really remember them, care about them, or they viscerally hate them. And like, I don't know, like, how do you feel that? And some people feel very differently about Reloaded than they do Revolutions.
I liked Reloaded more than I liked Revolutions, for sure.
Okay, but you in general like both of them.
I thought that Revolutions was necessary. You needed it to sum up the story, but at the same time, it was like, okay, of course this is going to happen. Yeah, Hero has to sacrifice himself to save everybody, but you need to see it. You need it to happen. I do think The Matrix Reloaded was fun. The Keymaker, that whole intricacies, that kind of MC Escher staircases thing, loved it. All of that. Want to watch it again. Monica Bellucci in the tightest dress you've ever seen in your life. Amazing. Worth it just for her dress.
I am one of those people, and I don't know how many of them there are, who would argue that The Matrix Reloaded is like one of the best sequels ever made. Now, I mean, that's a bold statement, not in terms of I don't regret the sentiment. I just mean, like, how many movies am I including in that category? Because I'm not saying it's The Godfather Part 2 by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not saying it's even Blade Runner 2049. I'm not saying any of that. What I am saying is that I actually think the movie, it's not about it being as good or better than the original. It's about it being as good as you could want a sequel of it to be. And I think most people, why they don't like it, is they feel precisely the opposite on that point. But here's the issue. And I think when you talk about Matrix Revolutions, not Revolutions, Matrix Resurrection, the newest one, we talk about that. Understanding what I'm about to say is like kind of important, I feel like, to understanding why Matrix Resurrections is what it is. What people think a Matrix movie and a Matrix sequel should be, and what I think it should be, or what I certainly think the Wachowskis, certainly Lana Wachowski thinks it should be, are not the same thing. They're not. And you could think of that and feel about that however you want. But I think people in general, this has nothing to do with Matrix Resurrections directly. This was a debate that was ongoing. Like, if we did the podcast going through those three movies, this inevitably would have come up quite a lot, which is, I think people have a certain type of attachment to The Matrix, the first movie, that while I totally understand it, it makes sense. One could say it mirrors my own. I'm just not that sentimental of a fucking guy. And I tend to prefer experiences that, as you know, challenge me or are almost
You're
like
not nostalgic for The Matrix, though?
I didn't say I'm not hold on. I'm not saying, I said sentimental, not nostalgic.
Sentimental.
Like, I mean, do I feel sentimentality towards The Matrix? Yes. Do I feel nostalgic towards The Matrix? Yes. What I'm talking about is the way, have you heard ever a person who hates Matrix Reloaded, Matrix Revolutions talk about them and talk about the original Matrix? Have you?
Yes.
It's a take, Dana. I've heard,
and it's basically
a trillion times.
The first one is a standalone movie. You don't need the other one.
Yeah. Right. That's one of the many points.
And then I stopped listening, Marcus, at that point. So
okay, so because you disagree with them, but here's the thing, Dana. I'm saying that from everything I can tell, that is the majority opinion. And what I'm getting at by pointing out that that's not only the majority opinion, it's opinion that's endured for fucking 20 years, nearly, because those two movies came out in 2003. Is that like it's to me, like, it shows me, and this is kind of almost why people always praise The Matrix. Like, people didn't really want to engage with The Matrix in every way, which The Matrix, at the very least, could be engaged with. What you want to say the intention is, what the intention should be, whether the intention should matter, whether the intention is the right intention, or whether anyone should give a fuck about any of the questions I just asked, is a matter entirely. I'm simply saying that when I think about it, the more I think about it, the more I look at it, the more I don't find it all that perplexing that people feel the way they do about The Matrix, the original, and feel the way a lot of people tend to feel about the sequels. Now, I'm a lot more partial, for just reasons that I feel like I share some degree of the same bias, to the people who are like, Reloaded's dope, but Revolution sucks. I don't think Revolution sucks, but I do have a much, much, much more agreeable understanding of why someone would say Revolution sucks. Whereas when I feel like I've heard the arguments enough, I understand the arguments enough, I know many of the arguments enough to know why people who don't like Reloaded might say they like Reloaded. And by the way, I have met a few people who've said, I don't like Reloaded, but love Revolutions. Okay.
Ooh, what are those people doing?
I don't know. Maybe those people just really love Zion. I have no idea.
I guess.
And you know what? So be it. But I think, or they just really hate, you know what it really is? People who fucking hate the architect scene are people that say that. I mean, a lot of those people hate the architect scene, and then they say the thing that I'm saying is the common opinion, which is they kind of look at Revolutions to really owed is basically the same thing. They dislike them both, and they only like the original.
I mean, that ending scene toward the end of Revolutions, where you go to basically like this golden universe of energy and electricity, that's like, that seems kind of super dope. Even now, I think the graphics held up. I think it looks great, and I think it's
well. You've watched
fun.
them more recently than I have.
I have. Yeah.
There's a couple of the things I want to tackle before we move fully into Revolution. So I just to conclude this point, because I do think this is like one of the more interesting movie litmus tests there is. And the Matrix, that's another thing I'll give the Matrix Resurrections a fuck ton of credit for, even if it's like, depending on how you look at the wrong credit. It succeeded its predecessors in being yet another ultimate movie litmus test. Like, how someone reacts to it, I feel like tells me a lot about how they view or what they want from a movie, I guess. So, and it's not perfect. It's not one-to-one. I'm not saying, oh, if you think this, then you think this. It's like, there's a range there. There's some translation, but like, I do feel, and that's why I want to ask you a lot of questions about it. I do feel like there's a lot there. So what I'm saying with Reloaded and Resurrections is, I think Resurrections is a pretty like uneven, flawed movie. And I think a lot of this, just to be very clear, if you don't know or they came out so close together. I think it should have been obvious to people. Those movies were shot like more or less like they were one movie.
1 year apart?
No. They didn't even come out a year apart. They came out 5 months apart.
Oh my God, you're right.
One came out in May and one came out in November. So
that's right.
Yeah.
How did I forget that?
And I remember I saw them both in theaters opening night. So Resurrections, and I think similarly, I was like very perplexed when Reloaded ended. I think like everybody was, especially given how young I was. And when Revolutions ended, I was not so much perplexed as it was just kind of like, now, almost immediately after that, once I got the movie on DVD, I became really into it, but I only became really into the parts I liked. So Matrix, and this is still true to this day, there are parts of Revolutions that I like love and like I remember fondly and I enjoy, and I feel like you said, you need it because it wraps up the story. That's true. But there's big stretches of it that I'm just like, I'm going to hit the fast forward button. Like, none of this means anything to me. I find it to be the most boring, unentertaining, uninteresting thing ever. Can we just get to the good stuff? Some people feel that way about Reloaded. I'm like, did you watch the same movie? Reloaded is packed full of like insane shit. Some people are like, I want to fast forward through the car chase. I'm like, I want to throw you off a bridge. But it is what it is. So yeah, so there you go. With the Matrix sequels, in broad strokes, I really like Reloaded. I like Revolutions a bit less. I feel like you're saying basically you're on more or less the same page with me on.
My love for the films goes in order of their release.
Fair enough. And I guess I could say that, but like I said, the way I view Reloaded in comparison to the original is almost like I don't like to really compare them, or I like to compare them not in terms of what's better, but in terms of like what is like much more of a literal comparison, like what's actually different between these movies and why. See, because I think a lot of the reasons people don't like the sequels and don't like Reloaded, if they don't like Reloaded, or even if they like Reloaded, the things that a lot of people still don't like about it that I definitely like is the fucking shit with the architect, is all that shit. That's one of my favorite movie scenes like ever. And I get it. It is annoying. Like that's kind of part of the point. And this is what kind of kicks us into talking about Resurrections, because while Reloaded and Resurrections are incredibly different movies, they are almost the polar opposite movies, and that's intentional, as I'm going to get to. They, by being opposite, by having that intention and the intention of the opposite, they clearly come from the same sort of understanding of like what's ultimately interesting about the Matrix to presumably the Wachowskis, the people that made it. Is like they're not interested in in fact, I keep saying they're not interested. No, that's not really doing it justice. They're actively contemptuous and actively antagonistic to the idea of people treating these stories as like the sort of I guess simplistic Manichaean, which is a better way to say it, because it's like not about, you could say it's still simplistic, but it's more of a haughty-taughty philosophical theological term, right? Like Manichaean, good guy, bad guy, hero, good, hero, he start weak but becomes strong. Once he becomes strong and evil defeat, he is now God and he will forever defeat evil. And granted, that is the movie they fucking made, if you're talking about the original Matrix. But I think immediately they were like, we have to make these other movies so that people don't just view this movie as that. We don't want them to view it as that. And I think by definition, coming with the intention, seemingly, of wanting to correct the record of your own fans and audience. And granted, they did it when they made the difference between one of the many fundamental differences between I'll say for simplicity's sake, the making of both sequels, both of the first two sequels, 2 and 3, Reloaded, Revolutions versus Resurrections, is they were actually trying to make a big budget blockbuster that was topped the original movie in however they thought they could do that. That was the mandate from the studio, it was the mandate from Joel Silver, it was the mandate from the VFX team that was winning awards. It was the mandate from them themselves, or if it wasn't from them themselves, they at least accepted it. And if it was the latter, then they accepted it presumably on the terms that they would be able to make the philosophical literary case that they wanted to make, which was the following. This is the best way I could sum it up in the most simple fucking terms, because when we do our Matrix deep dives and I'm playing for you Cornel West and Ken Wilber talking about these movies through the whole of them, it will come very clear. Like the point of Reloaded and Revolutions is that these ideas, these mythologies need to be deconstructed. They are, if you do not deconstruct them, they are inherently systems of control that serve power. That's where these things come from. They come from power. They will serve power. And if you're actually against power, if you're actually for revolution, you need to be against the sort of romanticized, like kind of version of the world. You need to be for a more deconstruction, postmodern, if you will, though you could say, if you believe that the Wachowskis are more in the, like, you know, I don't know, like historical, like dialectical materialism, like non-postmodern kind of whatever. That's a whole fucking nightmare conversation. But if you want to go that route, that I personally subscribe more to that route, fine. But either way, deconstruction or recontextualizing, be it dialectical or deconstruction or both, it's like about putting these contradictions together. It's about saying, no, what you see in the Matrix, the baseline hero's journey, the baseline, that's not going to get you very far. It's only to get you as far as literally what the Matrix Reloaded tells you gets you from the architect himself. It's like, we just reboot you every time, and then you are the seventh version. And this, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the whole point. They told that story.
They did.
You don't have to like it. I don't like parts of it. You know, you don't have to like it. And I think this is the worst thing I'll say about the Matrix trilogy, if you will. I don't think it equals the sum of its. I don't think it's greater than the sum of its parts. Maybe if you include the Animatrix, which we'll have to have a whole separate conversation about. Have you seen the Animatrix, or you just didn't rewatch it?
No, I have not watched it.
You got to watch the Animatrix. You're crazy.
Yeah.
Yes, that's where you get all this everything. So
I also haven't watched the animated Star Wars stuff.
yeah, Star Wars Visions.
I know there's a ton of.
That's just a copy of the Animatrix idea. It's like literally the same thing. But I'll give one thing that the Animatrix has that, as far as I understand, Star Wars Visions does not have, is the Animatrix. One of the stories, like the main story, if you're going to watch only part of the Animatrix, just watch this. It's called The Final Flight of the... No, that's not The Final Flight of Cyrus. That's actually the opening one. It's called, the Second Renaissance. And there's the Second Renaissance Part 1 and the Second Renaissance Part 2. They're each like 15-ish minutes long. So the whole thing is just like a half hour to 40 minutes-ish. They are the official canon, how you get from modern society of 2003, or I mean, I guess today is not really any different, to the actual future in the Matrix. It's the canon history of the Matrix universe. Like, if you've not seen this, I feel like, damn, Dana, you don't even know your lore basics. Come on.
Not watched anything animated. I should, though. It does sound like
I mean, the Animatrix, we can talk about it more when we do an episode on it, because I have a lot to say about it, not just in terms of
maybe when we do the deep dive, I'll have to watch all the Animatrix.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm making you. I'm not letting you not, because I honestly want to talk more about the Animatrix than I want to talk about the rest of it. Because specifically for this reason, personally, the Animatrix, when that came out, everything around it, I guess, which again was part of the broader context of when these two movies came out. Because like I said, they only came out a few months apart. Animatrix came out in between them. Was like such a particular time in my life that was incredibly exciting and fun for me. And I would fucking watch that DVD. I can't even tell you how many times. And I learned about so many things I didn't know about. And I was like, I discovered all these other anime from that. I was like, oh, this is just really fun and cool. So I love the Animatrix. It's like, not just because there's good, and like not all of them are good. I've like some of because it's like 9 short films. Some of them like don't care for it at all, but they're all interesting. Like they're all different studios, different animation styles. They're all worth a watch. Not all of them feel all that meaningful or interesting narratively, or even stylistically, but they're all interesting. I think it was the detective story. That's the coolest one. I think that is Shinichiro Watanabe. So it's like, oh man, it's like that's one of the coolest. But yeah, I want to talk about all that shit. What was the one with the bottle breaking kids? Oh, I forget. But there's so many cool things in there. Anyway, enough about the Animatrix. Now I want to ask you more about the Matrix Resurrections and talk more about it. I guess I'll just say, the last thing I'll say to frame it up from what I was saying about those sequels is The Matrix Resurrections is a movie made after the Wachowskis, and notice Lily didn't even come back. Like, decided Matrix is done. It's dead. It's over. We told the story. Not everyone liked it, but we told it.
Well, did she help write it?
No, not even. I mean, I'm sure she contributed something to the story just by context, but like she's not credited, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
So there's 2 other writers credited on it, but they're not Lily Wachowski. So anyway, I feel like the movie by its very nature tells you exactly how it came into being. Warner Brothers was like, we're going to make this movie whether you are involved or not. And they were like, well, I'd rather be, when I say they, I guess I'm only talking about Lana, who I don't think uses they pronouns. So like, there you go. Like when they're talking to her, she's like, oh, okay, I guess I am going to do it. And I think there's a lot of things. She said things like, in a lot of ways, the movie reflects her being or wanting to be in a happier place in her life. Like she mentioned that, like, oh, like both my parents died in last year, and like dear friend of mine died. So like I wanted to be with my friends Neo and Trinity again. Right. Which is that's a sentimental statement. But
that like brings a tear to your eye.
Sure. But I guess my point is, that aside, which I think is very sincere and very much there, and we could talk about the sincerity of a lot of it too, because I think that can get lost in the main point I'm about to say. But both points in contradiction, if you want to get dialectical, exist together at the same time, which is this is a movie that's actively antagonistic and contemptuous to the very means of production that brought it into being, and to the audience, which are part and tied to that apparatus, that is demanding it or putting expectations over it. And I think it's even antagonistic to the expectations Lana herself might have for it. And I think it's antagonistic to the relationships that other people who are probably making it have over it, which is, that last part is the part where I start to go, I don't know if that's okay. Let me jump in over the very specific example, what I mean on that. And this is really all I can say about it. Now, you mentioned the new Morpheus, you mentioned some of these things. Lawrence Fishburne, and again, I don't know. I remember when this broke, my sister was making a big deal out of it to me. I was like, oh, that is such a Andrew Garfield, I'm not in No Way Home type of thing. That's what I said it was. And she questioned me so much on it that it made me think maybe it's not, because that is true. This is like Lana Wachowski. This is not like Marvel. Like, I don't know if they'd be playing that game. But, and the truth is, not only were they not playing that game, what they were actually doing, as from what I can tell, is the following. Morpheus is this movie because, not in this movie, unless there is some weird behind the scenes drama secretly with Lawrence Fishburne that he's like exploiting or pretending is not true to like gain some weird sort of sympathy. And is confident Lana's not going to admit to it. But the fact that sounds, when I say it out loud like that sounds preposterous. So I'm gonna default to what I actually think it is. What I think it is the Lawrence Fishburne is not in this movie because you want Lawrence Fishburne to be in this movie. Period.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Like, this movie is making choices deliberately to not give you what you
not give me what I want.
Yeah. So, like, that's
because I did want Lawrence Fishburne in it. Of course I did.
Who doesn't? And also, by extension, this is a similar point that has overlapped a lot in this movie. Not only that we don't want to give you what you want, it's that if we tried, you would never accept it as what you want, because everything is just, that's what the whole nostalgia game is. It's like a never-ending itch that cannot be scratched, and we are just being drug pushers if we try to give it to you. And inevitably, whether you're there today or you'll be there in a few years,
I get that
will
statement.
not ring hollow.
Do you want art, or do you want regurgitated
I'll
stuff that you asked for?
I don't know if Lana Wachowski has seen the Star Wars sequel trilogy, but I feel like this movie is the biggest, like, I wish they went back in time, showed people this movie, and then everyone at Lucasfilm and Disney was like, you know what? Those billion-dollar stock things that we promised our shareholders, I think we should just throw in the towel because we're going to fail anyway. And that they did. So, oh man. Yeah, I really wish now none of that ever happened, though. I can only, maybe we wouldn't be getting the Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett.
No, we definitely would not be.
I don't know about that though. No, I think we could get that without
that. They're necessary.
No, see, I don't know if they are.
Amidala.
I think every year that passed. No, I'm not talking about the prequels. I'm talking about it was 7, 8,
Rogue One, and all the spinoffs.
Yeah, the prequels actually, for whatever anyone thinks about them, they are necessary.
They are necessary,
or more necessary, or.
You need to know where Luke and Leia come from.
Hold on, I'll say this real quick. It's not even a matter of whether they're necessary. To your point, things like the Book of Boba Fett, the Mandalorian, other Star Wars material, Clone Wars, the entire series, that all sort of thing, have all built on that stuff. Guess what? How much building there's been done on those sequel movies since then? 0.0. I mean, unless you count some comic books, which obviously a lot of Star Wars fans would, but I get the impression no one likes these comics. No one likes any of these movies. Even the people that defended the shit out of The Last Jedi, or were apologists for The Force Awakens, or even were apologists or contrarians about The Rise of Skywalker, all of them now, hush, silent. Haven't heard a peep of them since 2019. Wonder why? Because everyone in the back of their mind knows, oh yeah, now that I'm out of the mirage when all this felt like it mattered, I realized actually none of it mattered, because it was all hollow corporate bullshit. And that's what The Matrix Resurrections is trying to fucking tell you. You don't want the thing you say you want, because you only want it because these fucking capitalist overlords over you have told you that you want. Remember what Neil Patrick Harris, now I'm going into rant when I told you I was going to ask you questions. I'll get back to that in a second. Remember the whole point. The best scene in the movie is the scene where Neil Patrick Harris is like freezing everything, bullet timing or whatever, and he's explaining his motivations. And yeah, literally a scene where the villain explains their motivations. But the architect scene was like a version of that. This is a kind of another version of that. It's like the opposite in a lot of ways. It lacks all the cold because it's like Neil Patrick Harris being smarmy or whatever. But everything he's saying about this version of the Matrix. So I'll tie this into another thing. You mentioned the look of the movie. And it's very interesting you say that because I remember when the trailers for this movie came out, I immediately noticed the look, but and I think a lot of other people found that to be exciting. I really liked it. Then I started watching the movie and I was like, ooh, this like does look like weird or almost bad. But then I was like, didn't take me more than a few seconds. I immediately, and the rest of the movie confirmed this, I immediately got what it was going for. And then I was like, oh, this is genius.
They're trying to make it shiny.
No, it's more than that. The movie,
a glossy,
like
commercialized version
for pills, because that's what it is. It's a commercial, whether it wants to be or not, whether it knowingly is or not, whether it's trying to be a meta commentary or a debunking of it or not. It is still, by definition, because it's called The Matrix, a commercial for pills. Come get your copium. Come get your nostalgia. Come get your member berries. Eat up, and then you won't worry about how miserable your life actually is, which is the whole point of what Neil Patrick Harris's character, he's not the architect, he's the analyst. What the analyst is explaining to you, and I love that distinction, the architect versus the analyst. So you go, the old Matrix was all numbers and code and cold and this and that, right? This, I realize people they want to be happy. And we're going to let them be happy, but they only can live in that if they are secretly miserable. And they're just, why are they secretly miserable? Because they're longing for something that's just out of reach. It's there enough that they can see it every day. They want it every day. Their entire life is oriented around what? Desire. They desire this. Well, and by definition, they therefore can't get it.
They explained that in the first Matrix, that they tried a perfect version, this perfect world, and everyone died because you have to have something to struggle against, to something to fight for, to be human, essentially. You can't just, to your point, they even give us that in the Matrix. They say that you can't have this perfect world.
In a weird way, I thought about that actually almost immediately. You could almost argue, I don't think it's correct exactly to argue this, but you can almost argue that this is like a weird roundabout retcon, because obviously that's all still canon, but like the way you'd believe it according to the architect in Reloaded. And
it might have been, I can't actually recall if it's the architect who says it or if it's
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's in Reloaded. It's also reiterated and expanded upon in some of the scenes, particularly the final scene with the Oracle and him. Which is exactly the idea that the Matrix and the various versions of the Matrix and the whole sort of loop of the one, all that stuff, it's based on this idea that like the very first version of the Matrix, a version we never see, a version that's probably very different from anything we have seen, was like essentially like totally logical, totally coherent. Everybody was perfectly happy all the time. It was like a paradise. That's what he says. But that didn't work. People immediately started to question the reality, and the whole simulation would crash because people just didn't buy it. They couldn't believe in practice. Actually, it's Agent Smith in the very first
I thought it was Matrix. Maybe Agent Smith in the first one who says it.
Each of the characters expands upon this backstory. So I just remembered Agent Smith in the first Matrix movie is actually the one who originally explains this. But it gets expanded upon and Reloaded, and expanded upon again in Revolution. Okay, so no need to cite the source anymore. The source, that's another thing in the Matrix. Return to the source. Anyway, the point is that when that version of the Matrix was put kaput, right? It was around that time that I think Zion, because of some of the people they found in that, but that's a separate question. I forget which version that's in parallel. It might have not been to the second or third version. But the second or third version is basically where they introduce, even though that what we also know from Reloaded is the second or third version was the one that had all like the weird like glitchy ghouls and vampires that eventually became the Merovingian and his entourage and all that.
Yes.
They make a cameo in this movie that's really uninteresting and unfulfilling, which again, part of the point, whether you want it to be or not. And again, I feel very ambivalent when it comes to that stuff. But nevertheless, the idea here is that after that, we started to get basically the Matrix that we know repeated over and over. The idea was like, Neo's this guy, he's the one, he comes in, blah, 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 rinse, repeat. So in other words, there's no inherent flaw, as far as the architect's concerned, at least. There's no inherent flaw in the Matrix other than that it has to go through this cycle and they lose a couple 100,000 humans or something like that every time. But like, they're like, whatever, we'll recover. But, you know, the architect being a program concerned with perfection doesn't like it. The Oracle being like, he's like, if I'm the father, she's the mother, has always been the one sewing in that other side. And so her response always was like, she was a counterbalance. This is why it's not really a retcon, I guess. She was a counterbalance to architect, but the difference with the analyst is the analyst, who's neither the Oracle or the architect, though you could say has some attributes or overlaps with both, is now just the one unified guy. There's no Oracle, there's no architect. There's technically Sati, but she's like considered just a rogue program, I guess, now, which is weird because that was not how that ended originally. But the point is that he now controls everything. And so he, like the Oracle, is very interested in human emotion and understanding humans as inherently illogical, and therefore the world of humans, therefore the Matrix, needs to be somewhat illogical or somewhat more of an intuitive, like, you know, because the architect goes, an intuitive program. It's more of like this intuitive idea. It's more of this idea of like, okay, people are based on feeling and emotion, and it doesn't always make coherent sense, but there's an intuitive nature where you kind of just make the leaps based off feeling, right? So that was the Oracle's point. Architect could never understand it, but he accepted it. Analyst takes that framework and says, oh, I understand it. And he like basically tries to reclaim all that stuff for logic through a kind of cynicism. And I think, to be fair, his cynicism, this is why I think is the best scene with him, is like, I think it more accurately distills human and what a human simulation would be like than anything in the original trilogy by definition could have. And I think that's an interesting thing. If I had to say one thing, because I think when you take the general framework of what I've been saying, that, oh, the Matrix Resurrections is basically exists as this cynical anti-movie that's an anti-audience, anti-sequel, anti-franchise, anti-like fun, anti-action, like name a thing, it's anti it, right? That makes it feel like it's just by definition not advancing the conversation. I think it is. And I think, you know, in a sort of a lighter point, in a lore-based way, you kind of mentioned this earlier. When you mentioned the whole thing with the humans kind of progressing, and like they literally say, no, what happened in the sequels doesn't matter. Like what you did change things. Like now humans and machines like live alongside each other. And that's obviously like a lore, like history continuity thing. But I think it also symbolically works a lot better, because I think what's happened since certainly the first Matrix movie is made, but also the sequels, is we now live in a world where everyone has a smartphone. We've now had decades of this sort of digital cohabitation existence. So I think if you're Lana Wachowski and you're thinking about that and have been observing that and been participating in it, you understand that it's not some one-way street. It's not a Manichaean struggle. It's basically like these things are going to be part of us, like it or not. And it's about how they're used. It's about who holds power. It's about, and then to me, from the framework of like a dialectical materialism kind of way, that's more accurate to what I feel the world is actually like. So in a way, I think the Matrix Resurrections gets its own concepts, at least in the context of the real world, much better than the original films ever did. They made sense at the time. They made sense as hypotheticals. But this is actually dealing with things as they really are, and then still also advancing the hypothetical, because the hypothetical of the simulation now, to me, is exactly what the analyst says. It's like, no, the only thing that humans find reality in is being in a constant state of desire, depression,
misery,
disappointment and like fleeting happinesses that come and go and are essentially like just on a delicate balance of sanity and lies. And like even the fact that the loop he has Neo in forces him to constantly like question his reality in a weird way. And I don't know if he exactly admits this, but I assume so, is part of it. He needs him to be questioning it, because if he's not questioning it, then he's not really engaging with it. By questioning with it and constantly putting himself in the position, as so many people do, of like having your therapist be like, oh, well, take these pills and you'll be fine. Now, one last thing I'll note, sorry, because I know I meant to get back to some questions. One last thing I'll note is about, because one of the critiques that I've heard come up about this movie is like this idea, like, is this movie anti-therapy or anti-psychiatry or anti-psychology?
Or like don't trust your therapist type situation?
Yeah, which, by the way, is a movie trope and always has been. So it's not like, you know what I mean? But I would say why I think the movie is provoking the sentiments, I don't think it's fair to label the movie with this. And the number one reason I say that is because I think, again, you look at what the rest of the movie says, you look at what all of these movies have said, is that, one, reject the idea of anything being a simple one-way, two-way street, black-white type thing. That's number one. Number two is this movie's not saying, when you think of the analyst and his character and his role, the movie's not saying the analyst is wrong. The movie is saying that the analyst is correct, but how should we feel about what he's correct about and what we do about it? Well, the rest of us don't have the ability to fly and remake reality like Neo and Trinity, like in a sincere way. What we can do is sort of accept and come into our power and live our truths, which I do. And if you say, oh, that's an anti-therapy sentiment, then I'm just going to say you're not going to good therapists, because good therapists would try to find a therapeutic way of helping you realize that in a way that's well adjusted and wouldn't be like, and look, again, given
in my
context
opinion,
of the filmmaker,
a good therapist will get you to a place where you don't need them anymore.
Well, fair.
You know
I
what I mean?
don't know. I mean, yes and no. I think that's reasonable, but I also think I don't think there's anything wrong with going to therapy for forever.
No, there's not. But I think that's their ultimate goal, is one day you'll be in a really good place.
Well, that's a contradict. That's another dialectical contradiction, because obviously by definition, these people want to make money. They don't want to really
they do.
Which, well, I'll just say this. I'll just say this on that though too, because like, and I meant to send it to you when I thought we maybe would do the deep dive. I was going to give you all this material, more reading for you, but I was over the last couple of months, I was reading a lot of interesting articles and stuff, about the specific like kind of trans experience angle of the Wachowski's background and how that impacts the original films, but also this one now. Some of the articles were written before this came out. Some were written after and include the reaction to Resurrection. And I would just say that in context of what I just said, I mean, I do think there's a reason why perhaps, if my interpretation is correct, someone like Lana might see that struggle that way, because, for a long time, like, again, like any other institution, like any other force, like any other paradigm, it's not one way. It can be used in different ways, and who holds power and how those relationships are is going to determine that. So in a world where being trans or questioning your sexual identity, questioning your gender identity is considered to be some degree of abhorrence. And we see this all throughout the history of psychology and psychiatry, how there's always a faction of it, or if not the driving faction of it, that's used as a form of oppression. It's used to be like, oh, women are all crazy, we should throw them in the institution if they disobey their husbands, right? That's kind of like the OG version. But there's been versions of all, and gay conversion therapy is not just a religious institution thing. It's always been involved in psychiatry here and there. And, other things, obviously gendered, like these things, and which then you kind of get in response to that. Sometimes I've also heard this brought up in the context of this movie, this kind of straw man of like, oh, well, you just want therapists that affirm everything you already believe. Well, if you're a delusional person, genuinely, that's the most dangerous and reckless thing a person could do. And it's like, again, like, no, that is a straw man. I think the point here is that someone who actually is really engaging with the person who they are, in treatment with and being honest and upfront about it and not making it such an isolating experience would inevitably reach a place of like, okay, we can synthesize these things. We can be honest and discerning and objective, but we can also affirm people's personal experiences. We can affirm people's desires. We can give them safe spaces to express and understand and play out those desires. That's another roundabout thing about why, or that whole allegory and stuff comes in with the not only trans experience, but just any experience with online culture. And like you could see it early on in the first Matrix film. It's like the whole promise of the Matrix, and why I think you see in the sequels that they're never like the Matrix is inherently bad. Well, they wouldn't say that because the whole point of like online and like sort of different layers, and now we're seeing this literally with like, oh, now everyone is in this all this metaverse stuff. You were telling me you got an Oculus for Christmas. Like
I got an Oculus, and Marcus, I haven't had a Facebook. I made a Facebook so I could get the Oculus.
Oh no,
They
don't tell
me
me that. You see, that makes the whole thing very nefarious.
They got me. I have not had a Facebook, and they're like, well, you can't have an Oculus if you don't have a Facebook. And I'm like, fine, I'll get a Facebook. Yeah, you have to have one to log in.
Of course you do. Of course you do. They're not stupid.
My picture is Iron Man though, so at least they think they're dealing with Tony Stark, so they'll know.
Fair enough.
I'll be safe.
But in any case, the point is that like people will be able to be other people, and that's not a bad thing. Like I know there's a lot of bad versions and there's a lot of boogeymen. There's also a lot of good versions. People can try on other shoes. People can be who they want to be. And that's not a unilateral, that's not a unitary thing, I think, is the other problem that we have in the way we talk about these things. It's like, oh, well, I'm now this, and that's permanent, and this and that. And there's all this fear mongering about permanence and surgeries and things like that. That's a separate conversation. I'm saying this is exactly my point. That should tell you that there is a utility to having safe spaces, simulated spaces, other sorts of experiences that don't require those things, to allow people to free themselves from the binds of like, you are Thomas Anderson, you work in office. Like that's the whole point, right? So anywho, I know we only have a few minutes left, Dana, or not even, but
yeah, keep going.
I guess I'll close it up since I didn't ask you all the questions I thought I would, but like I think I still managed to touch on all the points I thought I was just going to ask you about. Look, let me put it this way. This will be, given everything I've said, have I convinced you at all?
You have convinced me that there is more merit than I initially absorbed, but I'm still never going to watch it again. However, I'm going to watch the initial trilogy probably many more times in my life.
Wow. Okay, but are you sure you feel that? Like, no.
Yeah, I'm just not. It doesn't.
But it'd be one thing if you said
it doesn't add to that story. It's its own thing.
But okay, but like,
and
real
if
talk,
I look at it as its own thing, then I don't hate it. But it is not. It's part of the Matrix, and when I loop it in with everything, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth when looked at with all of the movies. If you look at it by itself, if you called it something else, if it didn't have all of this stuff, I would say, yeah, it's okay. And I get the symbolism. I understand where she's coming from.
On the first point, I can agree with you to an extent. On the second point, definitely strongly disagree, because I would say if this movie wasn't called The Matrix, and nothing to The Matrix would be one of the weirdest non-movie movies ever.
The weirdest, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I guess you do agree with me there. It's just like, I get how you would say that though, without, but the previous point, right? Like that the other movies form a complete story. You don't need this one. That's why I said it. It is a sort of strange sort of
it's
epilogue,
you know what it makes me think of? And this might very much upset you, but
oh God.
Fan fiction.
Well, no, that doesn't.
It really seems like if someone was like, "Okay, guys, we're doing a fan fiction of what's going to happen after."
No, it's an anti-fan fiction, though. Like, no fan would write this unless they were trying to troll.
Saying. It seems like a bad fan fiction. Like somebody was like, "I'm going to do my best," but it's just not.
No.
Doesn't fit.
Okay. believe me, as someone, I don't know if this is what you meant by insulting me. As someone who's read a lot of people's fan fiction, okay? And has dabbled in it himself.
I meant in like a not well done version.
No, I know, but like, I guess I'm saying, I think there's a distinct difference, and maybe you're saying it's both, but there's a distinct difference between fan fiction that is like sincere, but is just like not well written or constructed or has X problems. Or
I'm thinking of lazy fan
for
fiction.
one fan.
I'm thinking of a
lazy. Okay,
fiction.
now you're really losing me. Now you're really losing me.
Yeah,
no.
I'm thinking like,
I would say that with
this, and it's gonna really be about this other thing and not about what it's about.
No, that's not okay. No, see, I strongly disagree with everything you're saying, if I'm understanding it correctly. Because really, if you're gonna make the fan fiction analogy, the only one that fits to me is this is like, and you do see this. This is what they call troll fiction, where it's like they take someone who hates the thing or trying to deconstruct or piss off the fans of the thing, writes a fan fiction that baits at you and then becomes a complete diatribe against the thing.
That pokes at you.
Yeah. Okay.
Like bad fan fiction.
But you keep saying bad. Like,
yeah. Like it doesn't fit the story. It doesn't, it wasn't meant in earnest.
Because I'm not saying I've ever read this, but I would argue that there's no reason that premise that I just gave couldn't be very compelling, fun thing to read if you're not going to be too sensitive about, this thing I liked or they're going against it. Now, I don't want to get into this conversation, but I mentioned The Last Jedi, and obviously there's a whole discourse around that movie that revolves around some of these same points. And I'm a person who fucking is the first people to tell people, no, like everyone is arguing about deconstructionism and The Last Jedi, like honestly is missing the point because there's nothing fucking deconstructionist about it. It's actually it's faux deconstructionism. It's actually just really stupid. And here's why, but but that's a separate point. This movie's not that, okay? And shit, man, now you're making me think we should do just a movie trial, Last Jedi versus Matrix Resurrections, and compare and contrast the two. But
that sounds fun.
That only works if you're like a big fan of The Last Jedi, which I don't know if you are.
Yes, I am a big fan of The Last Jedi. That would work.
Oh, we're doing this then.
Let's do it.
Oh, you know what? I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it because I doubt my defense of The Matrix Resurrections will be even at like a level of passion that I think you probably have for The Last Jedi if you have.
Yeah, The Last Jedi. Yeah.
I will bring that's my point. I'm not saying because to answer your own question, am I dying to watch this movie again? Well, in a way, I am dying to watch it again because I want to see how I'll feel differently. But am I going to be like, oh my God, I'm going to watch Matrix than the other two? Well, I'll tell you right now, if I fucking watch 7 hours of Matrix content, 8 if I count the Animatrix, which I've done many a times, what the fuck is another like 2.5 to watch this movie?
Yeah.
Nothing. I'm going to watch it. So that's why I'm like, Dana, I don't know if you're being sincere right now or you can really commit to what you said. There's no way you're not going to fucking watch it again. I'm sorry. I don't buy it. Even if you hate watch it, I'm not saying you're going to suddenly like it. I'm just going to say, I feel like you're going to watch it.
I suppose if it's on. And you're like, fine. Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, I rest my case. Dana and you'll watch it again. So I, by default, already win. And that's all there is to it. Dana took the red pill. She said she's going to watch it again. Okay.
I had already taken the red pill.
Oh, shit. Don't say that. You're not allowed to say that anymore. All right, Dana. Let's wrap it up here. Any last thoughts you have?
I don't think so. Except that you should always take the red pill.
No, Dana, you can't say that. Dana, you can't say that anymore. You know what people mean by that, right? That's a whole separate conversation. Oh no, it's become like code word for become like a neo-Nazi.
What?
Yeah, you don't know about this? Oh my God. No. I gotta send you some of this material. Man, Dana, I can tell you're not a Thomas Anderson. You're not online all day. you work. To be fair, no. You know what? It's good. It's a good and bad thing. Because like I say it's good because it's better than the alternative.
Because I turn around and all of a sudden something means something else.
No, you're an example of a person who actually has a job and a life and isn't like some person like Thomas Anderson. Well, Thomas Anderson has a job, but he is a job where he sits at a computer all day. So it's the same as his waking life. life. Yeah, this is different, and I understand, but yeah, don't go around. Just whatever you do, I'm genuinely warning you, Dana, for your own safety. Do not go around telling people take the red pill because someone will misunderstand you.
Good to know.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. All right, we'll leave it there. Matrix Resurrections. It's an interesting debate to have for sure, and we'll probably come back to it at some point. And look forward to Licorice Pizza, which I'm dying to talk about. I have my take frozen in cryo stasis, and then
where it should be.
We're gonna get you're gonna get genre Venn diagram. Nobody Walks. It's gonna be a fun hate watch for me because I know it. I'm like, even if it's actually decent, I still have to hate it just for the fun of this. So yeah, we'll do it.
Sounds good. Talk then.
Get some women, take them to the Peachtree Dams. I say get liquored up and take them to the Peachtree Dams.
Do you know what I mean? You know why? It's a scary thing to give to a guy like me. Do you know what I mean?
I say get liquored up and take them to the Peachtree Dams.
Do you know what I mean?
I say get liquored up and take them to the Peachtree Dams. Get liquored up and take him to the Peachtree Dams.
Do you know what I mean? You know why? Final cut. It's a scary thing to give to a guy like me.